Welcome to Lawyers in the House with Motley. Wish you had a lawyer in the family? Now you do. Here's your host, Veronica Waters.
Hey, welcome to Lawyers in the House with Motley on WSB. I'm Veronica Waters. Happy to have you back in the house with us for another special episode. I think you're really going to love this one. Whether art is inspired by truth or truth is stranger than fiction, today's episode makes me think of a favorite recurring character on Saturday Night Live. Okay, now I'm going to need you to give me a little bit of grace because while today's topic is a pretty serious one, of course, we know SNL was designed to make us giggle. But you may recall this skit. Tom Hanks playing a character called Mr. Short-Term Memory. He was a guy who got bopped in the head with a pear and at that point began to suffer short-term memory loss very immediately. One skit showed him visiting a friend in the hospital, Phil Hartman, and he said, "Hey, I came as soon as I heard you broke your leg." He brings him flowers. And he's like, "Oh, how'd you break your leg?" And Phil Hartman says, "Well, I was up on the roof clearing some snow and I fell off and broke my leg." And Tom Hanks' character goes, "Oh no, you broke your leg? How'd that happen?" And before 2023, fast forward to today, I did not know that such a thing was actually possible. To me, that was just an SNL skit. But who knew that you could actually suffer something like that when you have been injured? And that is what we're talking about, just a little nugget of it today. But really today's show is all about the in-person evidence of how Motley injury attorneys fight for their clients to get justice. And it's the story in the words of one of those clients himself. Let's start off with introducing today's Motley injury attorney in the house. Her name is Margaret Grindleski. And you remember Margaret. Thank you so much for being back in the house with us, Margaret.
Certainly.
Happy to have you here. Now, Motley was able to welcome Margaret into the family in 2011. But before that, she had an entire first career as a licensed professional counselor, yes?
Yes, that's correct.
Went to Kennesaw State for your bachelor's, got a master's degree in counseling from the Georgia School of Professional Psychology, and then decided to, after that career, become an attorney, got a Juris Doctor from John Marshall Law School. What launched you on that path, Margaret?
I wanted to assist people in different ways than I was assisting people as a counselor, and I felt like becoming an attorney would fill that need in my life, I guess.
Feel like a giver? You're a giver?
I'm definitely someone who wants to solve problems.
Yeah. So. Now, what I heard about you from a little legal eagle birdie is that you probably work on more cases in the firm than anybody else.
Possibly, yes.
Why is that?
I just take a lot of different cases from different places and work them until we can get them resolved, or if they need to go to litigation, then we review that as well.
What is the thing that really calls to you about personal injury law and the work that you do?
Well, I love helping people and problem solving, and I like challenges, so that's what drives me is the challenges.
Yes, I remember you telling me that before. Like you really relish when there seems to be an obstacle or something that you can actually like sort of undo and fix and make right, like a puzzle.
That's correct. I love puzzles.
I love it. Thank you so much, Margaret Grindleski. And sitting next to Margaret is one of her clients and, dare I say, friend.
Yes.
Richard Blankenship. Now, did the client relationship come after the friendship or before?
After.
Yeah. All right. So let's meet Richard Blankenship, who actually met Margaret in her life as a licensed professional counselor. How'd that happen, Richard?
Well, I was starting a counseling center 20-some-odd years ago, and Margaret was one of the first people to come call on me in her role, and she was very helpful to me in getting that counseling center started and helping escalate and elevate a part of my career that had never happened before, and we've been good friends ever since.
Wow, that is fantastic. And so that might give you a little sneak peek into how Richard and Margaret ended up connected again in Margaret's role at Motley Injury Attorneys, because he kind of knew exactly whom to call. Welcome to the house, Richard and Margaret. So glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
This is Lawyers in the House with Montlick on WSB. We are talking about a testimonial, I think. Would you say a client testimonial? And what's interesting is, like Tom Hanks's character, Richard's injury came to him through something that seemed a little bit minor, you told me, right, Richard?
Yes.
Tell us your story.
Well, it happened one evening. I was leaving my office, and the only two vehicles in that parking lot at that time of day were me and the one that hit me.
Wow.
And I was driving actually slowly across the parking lot, and I didn't even see it coming, but this big Ford pickup just backed out of a parking place and broadsided me. And it was almost like being T-boned. And during that accident, I know my head went sideways into the driver's door glass.
So just like boom, just like that.
But, the vehicle was drivable. It was damaged, but I seemed functional at the time, drove on home, and I'd gotten the insurance information.
Did you call the cops?
I did not on that one. I knew they couldn't cite on private property. And so since I had full access to the individual who hit me and had all of her information and knew where she worked and actually saw her almost daily. But from there, I thought, this one will be okay.
Okay, so, and how bad? You said the car was damaged but drivable. You could see the damage to your car?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it was evident.
Yes, it was
Yeah.
very clear.
But still, you could get in and drive home, no problem.
Yes.
Okay, you exchange information, you go home, and what? You feel fine?
I feel okay that night.
Okay. And then?
And then the next day, I go into work, and I am meeting with people, and all of a sudden, I notice that I am not remembering what they just said. And, I couldn't track with them. And this became scary because of my line of work. And so I immediately grabbed a clipboard, paper, and just started making notes so that I could stay engaged in those sessions and those meetings I was having. But I thought something is not right here. And I had never been that way. I mean, I've been doing what I do now for around 30 years, and this had never happened before. And so,
and you're not talking, just to be clear, you're not talking about what this client or coworker said to you last week or the month before.
right.
You're talking about right there in conversation with them.
Yeah. And I found myself going, okay, you just said, did you say this? And I found myself just repeating a couple of questions. And then I realized something wasn't quite right.
Did you connect it with the car crash at that time?
At the moment, I did not.
So how long did you have to deal with this? I mean, you must have called Margaret or a doctor right away.
I wish I had. And what I ended up doing was I learned to cope with it. I was just started taking notes and made sure I could stay engaged. But I thought this is going to be temporary. And then it wasn't. And it kept going on and on.
You mean a couple days, a week? 2 weeks?
It was going on more than a couple of weeks. And that's where things get really frustrating because I then called my family doctor, tried to get in and see what might be going on. And when I told them it was related to an auto accident, they didn't want to see me.
What?
They said, we don't see people from auto accidents because we don't want to end up going to court.
Oh, my gosh. Margaret, I'm going to have to ask you about that. Okay.
And then,
What a shock, Richard.
Yeah, they said, go to a neurologist. Well, I called neurologist, and they wouldn't see me because it was an auto accident.
No way. I didn't even know this was a thing.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
And so that delayed me, another probably 3 or 4 weeks trying to get any kind of medical help for this.
And the problem is still continuing. You're still
I'm-
having to write down
I'm still
every...
noticing it. I'm making it work, and it's going. It's a little more tiring. And so finally, what I did, I just called a neurologist and said, I need to come because of headaches.
Were you having headaches?
Not really.
Did you have any other symptoms?
No, it was mainly the cognitive issue and, maybe some discomfort. But that was the main thing, was I could not seem to get over that hump with that short-term memory.
So when you went to the neurologist, what happened?
I went in, I told him the symptoms and what was happening, and I said, I'm getting concerned that this might have been a concussion. And he immediately said, well, let's get you in for an MRI. Let's look and see. And he had me in for an MRI the next day. And by 24 hours later, we had a diagnosis, and there had been a mild concussion.
Mild? Oh my gosh, it sounds so major.
Yeah, it sounds it was a major impact on me.
Seriously. I mean, you could move around, you were mobile.
Yeah.
You could communicate, but that's a huge, your memory, your brain function is a huge part of who we are.
Yeah, it was just that short-term memory that just was not working right.
So what was the next thing? Is this when you decided to give Margaret a call? Or what's going on in your life at this time? You're kind of handling this.
I'm handling it by myself. And
Everything by yourself.
I had tried and I had settled accidents in years past alone. I had never needed any assistance in it, but things are different now. And dealing with the insurance this time was not like anything I had ever seen in my lifetime. And they were not being very cooperative and were trying to blame pre-existing condition kind of things that just were not even related to this. And so I just said, I'm going to end up really getting cheated here. And that's when I thought, I need to call Margaret.
You knew Margaret was an attorney by that point.
Yes,
right?
I've known that.
Did y'all have a cake for her? Were y'all in the same facility when you left counseling and went to law school? Did they have like a party for you? Okay. But you knew that she had become an attorney.
I knew she'd become an attorney,
Okay.
and I knew she was working for Mottlick. And so I called her and said, here's the situation. And she agreed to take the case and handle it from there. And it was settled very fairly and I think very successfully.
We are going to talk about that journey here on Lawyers in the House with Mottlick. I am curious, though, to know, Richard, before we break in just a moment, what was the breaking point for you when you said, I got to call Margaret? And did you not actually realize that you yourself were a personal injury client, potentially? Did you not put those
I think
together?
I realized I was becoming one, especially when I got that MRI result. And I realized, I have not had anything else happen to me in the last couple of months that could have caused that. And they specifically said this was something like a contrecoup head injury, side to side, which meant where I hit the door glass after being T-boned.
Textbook.
And at that point, I knew things just were not going well, and I had this was just going to have to be done differently.
You were going to have to get some help. Coming up, we're going to talk to Margaret Grinleski from Mottlick Injury Attorneys about the journey she had with her client, Richard Blankenship, and how she helped him on his journey to wellness. Don't miss it. Welcome back to Lawyers in the House with Mottlick on WSB. I'm Veronica Waters here with our special guests, Mottlick injury attorney Margaret Grinleski and her client and friend, Richard Blankenship. If you missed the first segment, let me just catch you up to speed right quick. Richard had a sort of a heavy impact crash just driving through a parking lot. Truck T-boned him out of nowhere. And then he had these terrible, terrible results. And yet he weathered it for months before he called Margaret Grinleski at Mottlick Injury Attorneys. Margaret, tell me about that first phone call.
So I received a call from Richard, and he started describing to me the situation, what had happened, and some of the things that the insurance company was responding back to him with when he had attempted to speak with them about his situation. And I basically knew right away what was happening. I could figure it out very quickly.
Seemed like pretty typical stuff from the insurance company side?
Certainly, yes.
Okay.
So because it's a parking lot incident, they were trying to minimize and say that it couldn't have been as serious as the situation had become. And they were also trying to say that a lot of his claimed injury was pre-existing when, Richard has already explained this was not something that could have happened previously. So additionally, Richard has medical payments coverage, and his own insurance company was not allowing him to access his own medical payments coverage as well.
Wait a minute. That sounds, from what I understand, medical payments, MedPay is supposed to kick in no matter what.
Correct.
No matter who's at fault, if anyone's
Yes.
at fault. Right?
That's right. Yes, that's right.
And they were not paying him his own medical payments coverage.
His particular insurance company frequently requires a lot of forms to be signed and some other things, information, before they will make any payments on the medical payments coverage. So he was quite frustrated with that as well. And so he sent me over all the, letters and other information he had collected, and we went through the information very carefully. And I started figuring out, the best way to attack every aspect of what was going on. And Richard was still having some symptoms at that point.
And how long after the accident had this been?
Maybe 5 or 6 months.
5 or 6 months. Richard, it took you 5 or 6 months to
You think
call
it was
Margaret.
longer?
No,
than
I think I called you about 2 to 3 months in.
You think it was 2
about
to 3?
5 months that the symptoms continued.
That they
Okay.
continued.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
But I called you right after I'd been to that neurologist.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And how are you today, Richard, as we sit here?
I have not had any problems in a number of years with that because I was able to get the medical treatment I needed and recovered from it. The thing that was unusual about mine is normally the doctors told me this clears up in a couple of months, and mine didn't. It went on for about 5.
All right. More about Richard's story and his journey to wellness and being made whole again with Montlick injury attorney Margaret Grunleski. This is Lawyers in the House with Montlick on WSB. I'm Veronica Waters. Don't go away. Hey, welcome back to the house. Lawyers in the House with Montlick on WSB. I'm your girl, Veronica Waters, here with Montlick injury attorney Margaret Grunleski and her client and now friend, Richard Blankenship. And we're talking about his journey to wellness after being T-boned in a parking lot and the terrible concussion that he got from that incident. If you missed any of those gripping details, don't worry. Just subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already. It'll drop into your podcast queue as soon as the new episode hits, and you can catch all of the story when you do that. So, you know what? Just go ahead. I'll take a second for you to do it now. Okay. Thank you so much. And remember, you can also watch us and see our smiling faces on YouTube and drop us a line any time of the day or night at lawyersinthehouse.com. Also, don't forget, hit us up on social at Montlick Law on your favorite social media platform. Margaret Grunleski and Richard Blankenship talking about this accident. And Margaret, interestingly, you didn't get called into this case until months after Richard's injury. Months.
That's correct. Yes. He waited 2 or 3 months to call me after he had been to a neurologist and received a diagnosis of a concussion without loss of consciousness.
How did you feel? Because what has always struck me is from doing this show, I keep hearing you got to get somebody on your side from the start. That somebody has to be an attorney, and it needs to be the right attorney.
Well, Richard's my friend, and I felt great that he called to begin with. I mean, he explained the situation, and I was ready to assist him in any way I could.
Wasn't too late.
No, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Tell me about the challenges, though, that you faced. I mean, this could not have been a completely easy road because he was getting so many roadblocks thrown into his path. So tell me about the fight.
Well, they had made their mind up that Richard had not suffered the serious concussion that he had received from the impact, and they considered it a pre-existing condition. And so, I had to go in and show them the proof that this did occur from the incident and just, work back and forth to try to get a better result than what he was receiving.
Is this someone has mentioned to me something about eggshell clients, eggshell
yes.
plaintiffs. Is this because he did mention that he had had some other accidents previously, right? So is this what
Correct.
they're sort of, tell me about that.
So an eggshell plaintiff is someone who has either a prior condition that's a health condition or a mental condition that is prior to the accident, but then because of that condition, when you have the collision, you may be an eggshell. You're injured more severely. It's not something that's expected, possibly. However, because of your pre-existing condition, you do receive a more serious injury, and therefore you're considered an eggshell plaintiff. And the defendant has to take you as you are. They cannot say, well, this was pre-existing, so it shouldn't have happened. They have to say, okay, well, if we had not been but for our negligence, this wouldn't have happened. So that's the eggshell plaintiff.
Okay. And so this is part of why you need an attorney to fight for you, because they were looking at your previous history and saying, oh, well, you can't be this badly hurt. You'd been hurt before. None of this is new. I guess they're throwing all of that, any of that at you. Yeah? Yeah.
Yes.
Frustrating, no doubt. Did it feel anything like your previous, whatever injury you might have had previously, what you were going through?
No, it was nothing like anything I had ever had before.
Yeah. But they weren't listening.
They weren't listening.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Margaret, tell me a little bit can you tell me, how do you meet those challenges? You said you love the challenges, but it's got to be, at some point, are you beating your head against the wall? Like, come on. Well, maybe you were, Richard, but Margaret knows the law, right? You might have been like, I feel like I'm running into the wall here. Margaret's like, I got you.
If I had said I was beating my head against the wall, the insurance company probably would have blamed that.
They're like, see, I told you, it's you, man. It's
Yeah.
not us. Okay. So tell me, you had to, figure out these challenges, beat these? Would you call it typical, Margaret? I feel like you're making it seem like such a simple thing, but
It's typical of the insurance company to challenge or dismiss or diminish the injuries and try to say there's no causation for the injury, things like that. So in Richard's case, he was in a parking lot. They tried to say, the impact could not have been serious enough to cause this incident, his injury. However, the way Richard was seated in his vehicle and where it was hit, his head did go from side to side and hit the interior of the vehicle. And Richard was in a much smaller vehicle than the F-150 pickup truck, this was an older F-150. It had steel bumpers. It didn't have, impact bars as they have now. So it's, you have to investigate all of the situation and see all of the facts. And then in addition, he did go to a neurologist, and he was diagnosed by the neurologist as having a concussion. So, you do have to collect all of the medical records and present it with the facts to the insurance company.
Yeah. So despite the fact that you had the diagnosis, you had visible damage on your car, and you had what I'm sure people could testify to as the way you were interacting with them, which was different from how you were before the accident, none of that seemed enough until you got Margaret from
Right.
Martin Lake Injury Attorneys sort of fighting for you. So did you learn a lesson right away, Richard? Always call, if you're hurt in an accident, call a lawyer.
Well, I wish I'd learned my lesson right away.
What,
because,
Richard? Come on.
A couple of years later, I guess it was, my daughter was in an accident, and I did what I insisted, as always. I'd had an uncle who was big in the insurance industry for decades. He had always said, go to the emergency room, get an x-ray. It'll help the insurance companies act quicker. And even that became an issue for my daughter. And because I had settled an accident with this company years earlier, I thought this will be a breeze. And then, lo and behold, she started getting the same garbage from that insurance company that I was getting in this one. And at that moment, I immediately said, we're calling Margaret.
Yes. So lesson finally learned.
Lesson finally learned. Insurance companies today are not what they were 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. Margaret,
Yes.
what say ye?
Well, it was very much similar to his daughter's case was very similar to Richard's case in that they were dismissing a lot of her wage loss and other, medical bills, saying it wasn't related and they weren't going to cover the accident impact was not serious enough to justify the treatment that she had received. And so that's when I stepped in and took over.
Was there anything about either Richard's or his daughter's case that gave you an extra challenge? And if not, doesn't that still sort of display, at least to me, it sort of shows that somebody with the training and the know-how is still needed, whether the damage is great or not, whether the injury is big or small. Like, there's just stuff that we can't do. Or was it extra challenging? That's a lot. I threw at you at once. Go ahead. Let me just sit back.
So when you communicate with the insurance company, they record everything that you say. They take notes. I mean, you could just say something friendly off the cuff, and later that could be, used against you, so to speak. And they're, like if they asked you, well, how are you doing today? And you respond, oh, I'm doing fine.
Fine.
Yeah.
Thanks for
then
asking.
that's going to turn into, oh, well, you were fine when we first spoke with you. So his daughter had been communicating via email and over the phone with this insurance adjuster. And luckily, they were able to get me copies of all of the communication, and I saw what was happening. And a lot of it had to do with their wage loss, and they were just not going to accept the wage loss at all.
She couldn't work, meaning she couldn't work because of her injuries.
She missed, some days. It wasn't a lot, it wasn't like a long period of time or anything like that. However, I had to go in and figure out what could we do to prove the wage loss and show them that it was owed. So, again, we had to collect a lot of information and present it to the insurance company a certain way. Additionally, the medical payments coverage had not wanted to pay out again.
Wow.
So
Same insurance company, Richard?
Same company.
Okay.
So I was able to overcome that issue as well with some communication and creative working on that. So
What's going through your head, Richard, as you listen to this story now as if it wasn't yours?
Yeah, first of all, it's very disheartening because there's times I honestly think insurance companies are out to destroy us. And it feels that way in so many areas that I hear about, see, and have experienced. And it's sad. It's tragic that, because you pay for insurance to help you when you need it. And then when it's not there, you feel stuck. And so, the thing I look at in hindsight is, if I'm ever in an accident again, I'm going to call Margaret before I call the police and an ambulance.
Yeah. It's so interesting to think about. And yet, if you think about it from the insurance company's point of view, they're a corporation. They're in business to make money and to keep it and make shareholders happy. And their staffers are probably trained almost as hard as Margaret here is trained, because I don't know if they have scripts or, they have rules that they have to follow. And I don't know if it's like that John Grisham movie and novel, The Rainmaker, but, there might be just a point they're saying if we tell them no long enough, they'll just go away. Now, that was a novel made into a movie, so it's fiction, but could that be real life? We don't know. But it does say something that you kept getting pushback and you kept getting no's until you hired Margaret Grinleski at Motley Injury Attorneys.
That's correct.
Not all heroes wear capes, Margaret.
I'm convinced that The Rainmaker is real. I think it's more than a novel.
Yeah,
I would agree.
you think so? Did you feel fairly compensated? Did you feel like you were made whole at the end of all of this?
I felt
And your
like what
daughter?
Margaret negotiated was a fair settlement. I felt like it was reasonable. It was not, I wasn't out to get rich on it or anything or try to shake down an insurance company. We just wanted some compensation for the impact on my job, my having to cut back at work and things like that.
Yeah.
With my daughter, we wanted all the medical bills paid. They were even trying to deny paying for certain medical services.
Wow. It's incredible. We do pay our insurance with the belief that first of all, with the hope that we might never need it. We hope we never need our insurance, but we do expect it to come through for us if we do. And it must have felt, as you said, just so gut-wrenching when they said no. Sorry, can't help you. Yeah. Margaret, coming up, we are going to have the Motley closing argument, and I want to hear what your advice is for all of our listeners and viewers going forward about how to make sure that you don't encounter these stumbling blocks. Should you ever be hurt in an accident through no fault of your own? Stay with us. The MCA is on the way. This is Lawyers in the House. Welcome back to Lawyers in the House with Motley on WSB. I'm Veronica Waters here with Motley injury attorney Margaret Grenleski and her client and friend Richard Blankenship, a licensed professional counselor who has shared with us his journey to justice and how he became whole again after a car accident, which for quite a long time robbed him of some of his memory. And now, Richard, you're remembering to call Margaret if such a thing should ever happen to you again. It is time for the Motley closing argument. Margaret Grenleski, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, I just want to remind everyone that having your own insurance, your uninsured motorist coverage, is very important. Luckily for Richard, in both of his incidents, the at-fault party did have coverage. They had liability coverage. However, had they not, Richard would have needed to claim, make a claim on his own uninsured motorist coverage, which Richard does have. He's good that way. But had he not had if you don't have your own uninsured motorist coverage and you also, the negligent party also does not have their own liability coverage, then there won't be any coverage for your incident. So it's very important to review your policy and make sure that you carry some uninsured motorist coverage and medical payments coverage if you feel so inclined. It is an extra added coverage.
So it's not just about having the right lawyer, it's also having the right insurance.
It can be.
Yeah. I remember learning, it wasn't until doing the show that I realized uninsured motorist coverage doesn't have to do with insuring the other guy. It has to do with insuring me. If the other guy doesn't have insurance, I didn't even know that.
Correct.
It's very eye-opening and makes you think twice about the people who are saying, let me just sign up for the bare minimum Georgia has, $25,000. Maybe that's something that you want to rethink when it's time to write your next insurance policy.
And with the cost of cars and repairs these days, you don't want the bare minimum. It may cost you a lot more than the coverage you've selected, so that's important to review.
I'm curious to know if you're still with that same insurance company, Richard.
I am.
Okay.
They have done very well otherwise. They had the one medical payment issue, but that was the only issue we've ever had with them.
Okay. Margaret, I would always ask Motley injury attorneys next to me if there was a moment where they ever said, oh, I wish this client had called me before.
Yes.
Happens a lot.
Happens a lot. So initially when the incident occurs and you speak with the insurance company, they will, of course, collect all this information.
Record your statement.
Yeah, they'll do a recorded statement. They'll collect a lot of information from you that they may not necessarily need, but they can use later. And it's really important to call an attorney right away. Evidence can disappear if you don't, and that can be crucial in getting your case resolved and getting you fair compensation. So you can call 1-800-LAW-NEED nationwide and get a free consultation.
All right. So it's about having the right lawyer on your side from the start, having the right insurance, having enough insurance. A lot of lessons here today on Lawyers in the House with Motley. Thank you so much to Motley injury attorney Margaret Grenleski, her client and friend Richard Blankenship. I'm Veronica Waters here on WSB. We'll see you next time.